There are 8 children that are deceased. I can't be strong for you. I think about the mother and what this family has lost. I think about this community and what this community has lost. And I don't have the words to give you, and I'm sorry.
An horrific mass shooting in Shreveport, Louisiana. 8 children between the ages of 1 and 14 were killed in what police are calling a gruesome crime scene.
A quiet neighborhood, a Sunday morning, and then in just moments, an entire city was thrown into grief. 8 children were killed. 2 women were left fighting for their lives. And the man police say caused it all was dead before the morning was over. This was not a random attack. This was not a stranger in the dark. According to investigators, this was domestic violence at its most devastating. Tonight, we look at what happened, what witnesses and officials said, and why this tragedy has forced Shreveport and the country to confront painful questions about violence inside the home. This is Mystery in Minutes. Before we begin, please subscribe to Mystery in Minutes. We tell real stories with care, truth, and depth, and your support helps us keep doing that. Thank you. Shreveport, Louisiana, woke up on Sunday, April 19, 2026, to one of the worst tragedies in the city's modern history. Officials said a domestic violence shooting unfolded across homes in the Cedar Grove neighborhood, leaving 8 children dead and 2 women critically wounded. Police identified the suspect as 31-year-old Shammer Elkins and said he later died after fleeing the scene, carjacking a vehicle and encountering police during a pursuit. Mayor Tom Arsenault called it potentially the worst tragedy the city had ever seen. At first, all anyone had been fragments, police tape, sirens, confusion, children gone, families shattered, and an overwhelming sense that something unthinkable had just happened in a neighborhood that, for many, was simply home. Authorities said the attack was domestic in nature, and early public statements from police made. As the facts became clearer, the horror deepened. Authorities said 7 of the 8 children killed were Elkins's own children, and the 8th was another minor relative. 2 women were also shot, including one identified in reporting as his estranged wife. AP later reported that the children's ages ranged from 3 to 11, though some very early coverage initially cited a slightly different age range as officials were still sorting through the scene. That detail alone changed the emotional weight of the story. This was not just another headline about gun violence in America. These were children in elementary school age ranges, children with birthdays ahead of them, school years ahead of them, ordinary futures that, within minutes, were gone. We described the shooting as the deadliest mass shooting in the United States in more than 2 years. And as the city tried to process it, leaders gathered in public, visibly shaken. Pastors, council members, and community leaders did not speak with polished confidence. They spoke like people hit by grief. They prayed. They cried. They called on the city to face the reality of domestic violence, trauma, and the emotional damage left behind not only for the victims' relatives, but for schools, neighbors, dispatchers, police officers, firefighters, and every child in the community trying to understand what had happened. That urgency became even sharper because officials said they were not then aware of any major documented prior domestic violence history connected to the case, even though Elkins had been known to police and had a prior 2019 firearms case. That made the case especially frightening to the wider public. If a catastrophe of this scale can erupt out of what appears, from the outside, to be an ordinary domestic setting, then the fear doesn't stay inside one family. It spreads to the whole community. By the time the public heard the first official summaries, police had already begun piecing together a fast-moving and deeply chaotic morning. Authorities said the shootings occurred early Sunday and unfolded across multiple locations in Shreveport before the suspect fled. Reuters summarized police statements saying the attack took place in a domestic violence incident, and that Elkins then carjacked a vehicle at gunpoint before police caught up with him during a pursuit. Investigators said the violence spanned 2 separate homes, referenced 3 locations as the investigation developed. That kind of early variation is common in fast-moving crime scenes, and what remained consistent across reporting was the core structure: multiple locations, multiple victims, and a suspect who left the scene before police confronted him. For the public, though, the timeline was not just about movement from one place to another. It was about speed, the kind of speed that leaves communities disoriented. By the time many residents even understood something awful had happened, the children were already gone, the wounded had already been rushed for treatment, and the suspect was already dead. In a matter of hours, Cedar Grove had gone from ordinary Sunday morning to national tragedy. That compression of time is part of what made the event feel almost unreal. And there was another layer to that timeline: the emotional shock experienced by first responders. One official, a veteran public servant, spoke about the burden on police, firefighters, dispatchers, and the coroner's office, saying they would carry this for the rest of their lives. Local coverage of the press conference showed leaders explicitly asking the community to remember what responders had seen and what they would now have to live with. After the suspect was dead and the official facts began to stabilize, Shreveport was left with the part no breaking news banner can fully show: the aftermath. The city's public remarks, as reflected in your transcript and local coverage, were filled with concern not only for the immediate relatives, but for classmates, siblings, teachers, neighbors, and the wider Cedar Grove community. Leaders announced a prayer vigil and emphasized that support would be needed well beyond the day of the shooting. There are limits to what anyone can conclude in the first 24 hours of an investigation. Authorities were still working through motive details, evidence, and the full sequence of events. That uncertainty should be respected. But some truths were already undeniable. 8 children were dead. 2 women had survived critical injuries. A suspect with prior contact with law enforcement had carried out a domestic attack and died after fleeing police. And an entire community had been forced to confront how catastrophic violence inside a family can become. And maybe that is the final lesson here. Some tragedies demand more than reaction. They demand that communities get serious about the danger signs. They too often push aside domestic instability, emotional collapse, violence in the home, threats that are minimized, support systems that people don't trust or can't reach in time. The leaders in Shreveport said in different words that this cannot just be another day of condolences. If that message survives after the headlines fade, then the city may yet pull something meaningful from a mourning that otherwise seems almost impossible to understand. Because in the end, this story is not only about how 8 children died. It is about what kind of country keeps finding itself here. Thank you for watching this report on Mystery in Minutes. If this story moved you, subscribe and stay with us as we continue covering the cases and headlines that matter most.